Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to be here with you. The idea behind the show is really to pay honor to humankind. And why I do this is because when I open my eyes, when I am in a place where I can see, and you know what I mean by seeing, when we can actually understand what's around us, I see greatness in our world, and I am really blown away by what we have developed over a given amount of time in terms of more people being fed in the world than when I was growing up, more medical care in places far, far away that never received much of that whatsoever. Again, when I was younger, I was born in 1960. I believe strongly that if our focus in life was more so directed towards such things, the beauty of humankind and the shared earth, our shared earth, and what we have accomplished, I really believe there would be much more peace than there is and much more humanity. So let's work toward that because it's there and it may be as simple as opening up our eyes and seeing it more so, at least. This show is sponsored by avrumrosenzweigart.com. If you'd like to take a look at my art or even purchase it, Mother's Day is coming up, Father's Day. You can buy originals, prints, or merchandise. Have a look, avrumrosenzweigart.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited that my guest today is Phyllis Taylor, otherwise known as the Prison Lady. How are you, Phyllis?
I am great, thank you. How are you, Avrum?
I'm fantastic, and I am so happy that you're here on the show because of what you do. And I have a personal interest in what you do because of my background, and we'll speak to that in a few minutes. People are probably thinking that I was incarcerated. It was not. you know, the thing that I am so enamored by, not only, of course, the 10 years that you have volunteered in prisons, but you wrote a book and it's called The Prison Lady, right? It's available at Indigo and Amazon. True stories and life lessons from both sides of the bars. And the coverage, the media coverage that you have secured is incredible. Like, you are very tenacious. Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? There's something that is intriguing about prison, I think, because law and order.
Law and order, right? Which every political party is saying, oh, that's what we're concerned with. But on a personal level, you've done unbelievable things behind bars, if you will. And you wrote a book about it. And
Yes.
you've been on so many media outlets. I just posted a picture above you, which is with you and Steve Paikin on TVO.
Yes. That
Wonderful.
actually, yes, that was very early on. And actually, I just adore Steve. And that particular interview opened some really beautiful doors for me. I think that was the beginning of the beginning.
What sort of doors did it open?
Well, if you want to talk about one of the most exciting doors, I'm now currently working with a movie producer who happened to have seen me on Steve Paikin.
Very
And
cool.
that's a bit of a story. And thank you for putting up my book and that nice picture of me.
You are welcome.
Yes, it was being on Steve Paikin that movie producer saw, was intrigued. And I thought it was all a joke. He said, how about we have a conversation on? Yeah, right. How about we meet for coffee? Yeah, right. Are you a public speaker? Where are you speaking? I'm speaking at the Best Show. I'll be there, he said.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, right. Until I saw him show up.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what you've accomplished. Let's give some context here. You have been volunteering in the prison system for over 10 years, correct?
A decade. Yes,
For
correct.
about a decade. You've worked in 4 prison for men and 1 prison for women.
That's right.
I think
That's
you've chosen men more so over women, and we'll get to that too. Um, I think that people who work in the prison system as volunteers, going in there and helping out individuals to feel better about themselves, to make their world better, even though it's so limited. Kudos to them. Kudos to you, because that is an arduous task, is it not?
it wasn't for me, not particularly. And one of the words, although you've used the beautiful languaging, one of the things I do is I go in and give them hope.
Yeah.
Most difficult is those who are in protective custody or in for life. But even there, you can have a better life if you know how to handle it.
It's quite compelling too as to how you came about this. You were working for a law firm for about 30 years, right?
That's correct. That
And
is
it,
correct.
and someday things went south for you there. You were let go,
30
and
years. Yes.
that's a long time. 3 decades in a law firm.
Yeah.
Well, good, well done to you for that too. Anyway, so I know the difficulty of going from one job or one career to the next.
Oh,
The first few days are really nice because you can sleep in, right?
oh, that didn't last very long, but yes, it was the only thing that's nice. It's still the only thing that's nice.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. But you appear to me to be a type A personality. So if that is correct, then you need to work. You need to produce and create.
I absolutely do. I have always been a high achiever. I don't have any idea what kind of genealogy has created that in me because I have quite a history and quite a background having grown up. But uh, I'm a high achiever, and I was in the law firm. And just to be clear, having worked 30 years at a beautiful career, I loved my job immensely. I was teaching lawyers for 20, teaching technology to lawyers for 20 of those years, being respected, being loved, and loving it back.
Very good. So what you can say basically is the things that you have done in life to date, and you should live till 120, as we say in Jewish. You've actually been satisfied with it. You felt
You know, it's
purpose.
interesting. It's interesting. I was just telling my partner the other day that when I got out of school and began working in a law firm, because that was my forever job from the moment I stepped outside of school, um, I didn't want Friday to come, Avrum.
Hmm.
I wanted it to go on and on. And I mean, I was married at the time, and I didn't even want to go home. That was a bit telling, but I wanted my job to go. I was so mesmerized with student lawyers, with law clerks, with clients. I was working for a criminal lawyer at one time, so I've come full circle, and I think some beshert, some divine intervention has happened as well.
Phyllis, let me ask you a question because I know there's regularly a lot of people who are struggling to sort of find that zone, to find the place that they're passionate about, that they can feel in their heart, this is right for me. What do you think it is about you that enables you to be so passionate and to ultimately love what you do? Where does that come from?
I have a joie de vivre. I love people. I mean, I love people. I go into a restaurant. Last Sunday, I'm in a restaurant. There's one other person sitting in the restaurant. There were two sisters actually, and I had to cross. I had to go across. I had to
Yeah.
introduce myself. I had to. I just love people, and I'm passionate about life. So I'm passionate about everything, and I'm really passionate about prisoners.
How did those people respond whom you approached in the restaurant?
Well, here it's just a tiny bit of a story. We're sitting there having sushi, and it was an empty restaurant, a good restaurant, but it was empty and it was an off hour. And I heard this family talking about their dad who was going to Israel.
Yeah.
And I kind of yelled across, not yelling, but spoke across. I said, "Is he going to Israel?" I thought that's what I heard. And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh my God, all the best to him. I just so respect that." And they said, "Yes, he's going with the Adath Israel."
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm speaking there on May the 28th." So I got up. I mean, it's just
Good for
natural.
you. That's good for you. It's interesting because I myself am very much into speaking to strangers. I think
Oh,
it's a really big deal, and I've done
yes.
soliloquies on it. The other day, I was at Metro, and there were a bunch of people walking, and I would say, "Good morning, how are you?" And this fellow looked at me like I was absolutely bizarre, and he goes, "Do I know you?" I go, "No, I don't know you, and I'm pretty certain you don't know me. I just want to say hello." He goes, "Oh, okay."
I
But
love that.
most people, Phyllis, and tell me if you agree with this, when you enter their world for a moment, it's very nice to see you, or what a lovely sweater you're wearing. They're grateful. They appreciate it.
99.9% people appreciate the compliment, the warmth, the connection, the
Yeah,
moment. Maybe they don't have that
yeah,
readily.
yeah.
And you get the one, just the odd titch of a person that's like not interested and you just back right off.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But I encourage people as much as possible in a safe environment, of course.
Oh, yeah, Metro's safe.
Metro safe, so is no frills.
Yeah,
Those are our supermarkets, folks. So
right.
let's continue here with your story. So you leave your job after 30 years, and one day a friend schleps you to a show that Oprah's putting on here in town. And the fascinating thing about the show is it's obviously clearly what she does, which is to try to help people enhance their lives, to motivate them, and so on. And she streamed in five female
Six,
prisoners,
six
six,
women.
six.
Yeah.
So tell me about that show. Why did you go? Because I know you didn't want to.
I didn't want to go. My girlfriend called me and said, "Hey, Oprah's coming to town and we're going."
Yeah,
And I said, "I'm not a daytime TV girl. I'm a career girl. I mean, I don't cook and I don't watch TV during the day."
yeah,
And so I wasn't interested. And I said, "Hey, I just lost my job. I'm not spending $250 on a ticket for Oprah." She says, "But I know that you got paid out very well. I mean, they
right.
paid me more to get rid of me than they did to keep me." And she said, "We're going," and I didn't want to go. But as you say, Oprah had Skyped in 6 women from a penitentiary in Indiana, and I was mesmerized by them. I've always been very interested in marginalized and disenfranchised people and criminality and criminal life and criminal behavior. These women were very close to the door. They were going to be leaving. Their sentence had been completed, and they were really paying attention to all of the speakers as well as Oprah, the moderator. And it was Bishop T.D. Jakes who was on the stage, and he was talking about gratitude. He was talking about forgiveness, and it just resonated with me. His speech resonated with me, but the prisoner's reaction was touching my heart, touching my soul. It was pivotal.
Well, Phyllis, what do you think it was? What do you think touched your soul?
Well, I could go right back to my childhood and talk about when I got caught sneaking out the bedroom window because I was hitchhiking down to Yorkville to go dance in the window of Boris's discotheque. And when I got caught crawling back in the window, I was incarcerated in my own home for 1 year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly. I'm always asked that. It's a fair question. But it could have been that. It could have been compassion. It could have been curiosity and or all of the above. But I can tell you what happened as they were speaking and they were having conversation with Bishop T.D. Jake of the People's Church. That's who he is, FYI.
Hmm.
I literally lunged out of my seat and I screamed out, "Holy fuck.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life." And I did. Well, not the rest of my life, but for a decade.
Those epiphanies are phenomenal, aren't they?
It was like a light bulb went off,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's life altering.
Uh, do you have those epiphanies very often in life?
I think I have epiphanies regularly, but it's not a daily thing. It's not even a weekly thing, but I do a lot of thinking. I do a lot of thinking about myself. I do a lot of thinking about my life, and I do a lot of thinking about other people's lives. And I will circle back to them and I will say, I was thinking about our conversation and I should have said this or I should have added this. And
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
does this resonate with you? And I'm always wanting to help, just to help.
Did you have go-go boots when you were about to hitchhike downtown?
Well, let's just be clear. I had a go-go costume
Yeah.
from head to toe. I
Yeah.
was fully dressed. I was 15 years old. I was
Right.
15 years old. And I had turquoise, this color turquoise. go-go
Nice.
dancing outfit with white fringe everywhere, and yes, tall white go-go boots, and I'm
Right.
climbing out the window with that.
Up to your knees. I think they went up to the knee, right?
Just, you know what? Just about.
So let me ask you a question. So you're climbing out the window and your dad catches you. I need to understand this because it was so deeply disturbing to me. Your father locked you in the room for a year, basically. Obviously, you got food and so on. What was up with your dad?
I was born into a split family.
Yeah.
So I describe it like this. My dad was ultra Orthodox, Jewish, ultra Orthodox. My mom was Jewish plain vanilla. Did not care about tradition, did not care about religion. She was born, born Jewish. That was it. So our house was steamy. Our house was angry. My dad was a Holocaust sympathizer and very angry man.
Mhm.
I was the scapegoat child. I was beaten routinely. I would be beaten for telling a lie. I'd be beaten for anything that was not representing integrity or a mark that was anything below an A. So let me assure
But
you that when they caught me, and that in itself is a cute story, but when they caught me climbing back in the window, my mother ran and got my diary. And Avrum, even back then, I could tell a story. And my mother and my father were reading my diary aloud. I mean, I don't even remember being embarrassed, but I should have
I'm so
been.
sorry.
And
Phyllis,
I
I'm
was,
so sorry you went through that.
but you know what? I'm not. I'm really not. And everybody asks the same thing.
Yeah.
When did you forgive your dad? How did you forgive your dad?
And did you?
I never had to forgive my dad because I never really felt angry. And I have stood in front of audiences everywhere and said, I am who I am today, not despite my dad, because of my dad. My dad taught me honesty. My dad taught me integrity. My dad never allowed me to lie, obviously. He insisted that I become a public speaker from a very young age to combat introvertedness. And I think it worked. And he also insisted that I work in a law firm. I am who I am because of him. He owes me nothing.
No, so I hear you this. But what about the people who are listening to the show right now or watching the show and they got the shit kicked out of them by their parents? Like that's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. I'm not advocating for that.
No, I'm
But
not suggesting you are. But did you not at some point in time say, Dad, like you beat me, right?
I never had that conversation with him. I never had. Listen, why not wonder about my mom? My mom sat there in the corner watching and was rendered kind of helpless. She was
Yes.
suffering from migraines. No, I didn't have that conversation. But what I do want to answer is that if people have been abused as a child, and it is an awful thing. I mean, everything's on a spectrum, Avram. People had it much worse than I did. But the idea is, and I know through my studies, I didn't know it back then, if we can understand what makes that person the way they are,
Yes.
and if we can find even a modicum of compassion and understanding, it's very helpful. And if we can also look at the silver lining, if you will, there is a silver lining. There's a silver lining for me. Perhaps not for everyone. I can't speak for everyone, but I can tell you what happened to me, and I can say that it has pushed me forward, and that my life has become what it is, and has come full circle because of my dad, who I hope and pray is really proud of me right now.
Do you think he is?
I think he is, other than the fact that I've strayed away from Judaism to some extent,
Yeah.
which I do attribute to him, I must say, because I probably would have been more leaning into orthodoxy or at least tradition religion if it wasn't for him making it a punishment rather than a joy. And so, but notwithstanding, I think he would be very proud of some of the stuff I have accomplished.
What about your mom?
My mom's indifferent. I told my mom I was pregnant. She said, yeah, but you know what? I'm taking a French class and it's fascinating
No.
at the U of T.
No.
My mom was indifferent. So she'd be proud in her way, but it wouldn't be like my dad. My dad would be beaming.
Isn't it fascinating though? It's the parent who
Yeah.
really takes the strong arm that we kind of veer towards. My mother and father of the two, my father was also, he was more emotionally or mentally abusive toward me. But when I think about my parents' pride, my mind first goes to my dad, like you.
I I just adored my dad. You know what? I don't know why I was able to overlook the difficulty, because that wasn't fun. I don't advocate for that. I certainly stand against any kind of abuse, any kind of abuse. But God, he made me. He was an introvert. He wanted to make sure I was an extrovert. I'm a 5 alarm extrovert. That works for me because I can approach people, I can love people, I can give them
Yes.
something
Yes.
every single day.
Well, good for you, Phyllis. Good for you. So you go home after the Oprah show, right?
Oh,
And you
yes,
have this light bulb. It's still sticking up above your head, right?
flashing.
Yeah, it's like going on and off. And you decide you are going to call prisons with like a 20-mile radius, and to
Oh,
see who wants you. So what happened?
well, first of all, notably, you've done your homework because that's exactly what I wrote in my
Yeah,
book. I don't even know what a 20-mile radius is,
yeah.
but
I don't know either.
I have no idea.
I know, and there's
I,
not like a lot of prisons in the 5-mile radius, 20-mile radius. But I
well,
get the point. I get the point.
yeah, I went home and I picked out, you know how they say diamonds are a girl's best friend? Not so much. It's Google. So I went home and I Googled every prison that I figured I could drive to. And I can drive, but I'm directionally challenged. And I thought, I am passionate about doing this. I'm going to go wherever they take me. And so I went through the Google and I looked up prisons and I called every single prison, leaving a voicemail message for all because you don't get through to a live body. And a couple of weeks later, I did get a call back in response to my voicemail from one of the prisons that was actually quite close to my home. Metro East. My first
Mhm,
prison was Metro East Detention
mhm.
Center.
And a detention center is different than a prison or a jail. How is it different?
So a detention center is where men and or women go once they have been convicted, but they have not yet been sentenced. There's a difference. You've been convicted, you're found guilty, you're going to prison, you know you're going to prison, but you don't know where, you don't know for how long, and you don't know your classification, and it makes you crazy. I mean, the unknown is crazy. And so that is what a detention center is. A prison, as we know it, is formally called a correctional institute. So I've worked at, I think it would be in total 4 correctional institutes. And they are much easier to work with because the people have been, for the most part, the people have been convicted, they have been sentenced, and they have been classified. And they know what their destiny is. And so that's what a correctional institute is. And just to be clear, many, if not all, I don't know, I haven't been in all of them, correctional institutes also have a detention center inside of them as well. And
Mhm.
those people are really in a lot of turmoil and pain, struggle.
How does that play out?
Not well, not well. They don't want to really pay attention to anger management. I mean, they're so damn angry that nothing's going to take it away at that point. At that point. And so some of them come into class and don't last. Some of them don't come at all. Um, I don't do as well. You can't do as well with a detention center. That was my first experience, but I did have a lot of respect anyway.
So, Phyllis, so you walk into the prison or
Yeah.
the detention center. Were you scared? Did you have a sense of, my God, everything here is steel? You watch movies about prison, you hear clanging. It's always clanging, right? What was
It's
that like
exact
for you?
it's exactly like you're describing it. So, but there was never any fear. I was attacked once. We could get to that later, but there was never any fear. I was so thrilled that I had actually received the call back, been granted an interview, and I was there to sell myself and to put my best foot forward to offer whatever it was I had to give. And at that point, I didn't even know what I was going to do exactly, other than I have a very long background with public speaking, being a motivational speaker, and I threw in life coaching because you talk to your friends, you give them a little advice. So that's what I kind of thought I might be able to do, but I really didn't know for sure.
In Yiddish, they're called an Eitzgegeber. You familiar?
I know, so I don't know that expression.
An Eitz is advice, and Gegeber is someone who
Oh,
gives it.
giver.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're an Eitzgegeber.
On some level, I certainly am.
Yeah. So this woman, she invites you to come down. She tells you to dress nicely.
She told me to dress for a prison interview and bring my resume
How did you dress?
in a three-piece suit like I was going to teach lawyers.
And you look sharp.
Oh, yes.
By the way, I have four sisters. I mean, one of them has passed, but I had four sisters. Therefore, I'm very conscious of women's dresses, and I love women's fashion. So,
But I only had one wardrobe. I didn't have a lot of, I've never had a wealth of money. And so I had a wardrobe for work. And that wardrobe was a three-piece suit to go and teach lawyers. So that's what I wore. And
and
a
tell me, you,
resume.
you did well on the interview.
By the time I arrived at the interview, something bizarre happened. My former director, to whom I had reported for 20 years, not the new one who had me fired because of intimidation, but the former director, saw my post on Facebook saying that I had an interview at a prison. She contacted me behind the scenes and asked me, "Is it by any chance Metro East?" She was then working at Durham College, and I believe is still working at Durham College, and had an in to the prison because they were training correctional officers. So she wrote me and said, "Do you want me to put in a good word for you?" And I said, "Do I want to take another
Oh.
breath? Of course." And by the time I arrived,
Is the Pope
Lori,
Catholic?
and by the time I arrived at the control desk and met with Lori Shank, who's the gal with my first interview at Metro East, she came up to me at the control desk and said, "Come on in. I know what we're going to do with your program." Program? What program?
Yeah, yeah. So I mentioned at the top of the show that there's something very personal about all this, and I'll tell you what it is. My father was a rabbi
Yes.
in Kitchener, Ontario. He was there for 36 years, and he passed in 1989 there in Kitchener.
Oh,
One of the things that my father used to do, and you'll find this amongst a lot of rabbis, ministers, imams, especially in smaller cities, he went to visit Guelph, uh, the prison in Guelph, right?
oh, yes.
Provincial, 2 years less a day.
Yes.
And I went with him as a child, and so did my sisters. And I distinctly remember, maybe I was 5. Most of my memories, I think they're 5 years old, but or 6 or 7. I don't know why that is. 8, 9. I remember Phyllis going into the prison. My father couldn't obviously take me where the prisoners were in the cells. And I was sitting in the front there, and I remember that my feet did not touch the ground. That's how little I was. And I was by myself. And I distinctly recall that prisoners were being led in and out, dressed in orange with cuffs on. And I was terrified.
Shackles.
Terrified. Shackled. I
Yeah.
was terrified.
Yeah.
Now, as a little guy, you were a grown woman when you first went into that environment, and you were basically okay with it.
The very first prison I went into, they brought me 4 prisoners in shackles. So, around the wrist, around the ankles,
Yeah, yeah,
put them up against the wall, patted them down. I was just so thrilled to be there. I don't
really.
remember any other emotion.
Yeah, no
No
fear at
fear.
all.
No fear. And you know what else? I'm never in a room with a guard. There may be guards right on the outside, even watching in, but there's no guard in there. And you know how quickly things can happen. But Avrum, here's the thing, and I hope I'm not interrupting you, but I'm going to stop talking 1 sec. When you are going into a place and you are delivering to these people love, kindness,
Yes.
respect, and hope, that's what you get back. So I always felt safe.
Well, what happened when you were attacked that one time?
A young boy had come into, this was in Brampton. I was working and most of my work was in Brampton at the Ontario Correctional Institute in Brampton that closed during COVID. But a young boy had come in. He might have been 18, just age of majority, 18, 19 years old. He came in, and I had a couple of rules, as you can imagine. I had an audience of 100 at the height of my career. I had an audience of 100. And this young man sat at the back of the room. But I have all my seats arranged in semicircles. If you would imagine a theater, it's much like that. Of course, not as pretty. And the young man sat at the back of the room, and I thought, well, I've got to get him into the theater part. And I walked to the back and I said, "Hi, what's your name?" and I heard a grunt. I
Mhm.
walked away and I thought to myself, give him time. He's new. He doesn't know what's going on here. And then I came back to his area about a minute later, and the room became tense. I'm not even sure to this date why the room became tense, but I think they sensed that something was going to go down, and it did. So I walked back and I said, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, but I have a rule. All of my men have to be sitting in the auditorium with us, and you're at the back of the room. And he was suspended on the back two legs of his chair with his feet in the air. I was afraid he was going to get hurt, actually. And I said, I need you to pull your chair into the circle. At which time he was enraged, and he picked up his chair and he vehemently threw it against the wall, and it reverberated back on me. So I can't tell you whether it was on purpose or accidental. It doesn't matter. He didn't care. That's my thought. But here's what happened. Three men picked him up, physically picked him up, and carried him out as quickly as they could into the hallways so that he could be met by and taken care of by the guards. And two other men each took one of my elbows and escorted me to a chair and settled me down and apologized for his behavior.
How did you respond to it?
I was so grateful for them. I was shaking. I was shaking. One of the few human emotions I've had that were negative, but I was shaking. I was upset. I was so sad for him and for me.
Were you?
And I was very, very grateful for those men. And I knew in that moment that I would be forever safe, no matter what would happen.
Mhm.
They would take care of me,
Mhm.
just like I take care of them.
What was your sadness all about for him?
Well, the little idiot is put into jail for God knows what. And here I am, a volunteer who wants to give him something.
Yes.
I want to bring something to him. I want to give him some enlightenment. I want to give him some lessons. I want to teach him how to do a better job or think about himself in a different way, whatever it was I could give him. And he rejected it.
Yes.
He was losing out on what I had to offer. And by that point, I already knew that I was bringing something of value because my audience was growing exponentially for prison.
Why were you sad for yourself?
I was sad because I felt I had lost him.
I
I
see.
was sad that I had lost somebody. That wasn't my biggest loss. I had somebody who I really lost. But I was sad that I could get through to him. And I was actually mad at myself that I didn't find another way. And I still to this day don't know
Yeah.
what I could have done.
Yeah. Well, who did you really lose?
Well, there was a man who was, I call him Cowboy Gord in the book. He was a very tall, slim, good looking. I mean, when he walked in an orange jumpsuit, I didn't see him in an orange jumpsuit. I saw he looked like a cowboy,
Mhm.
and he was a very attractive, good looking man. And we had some sort of tension between us because he would sit at the back of the room and he would kind of ask me questions that were not inappropriate, but somewhat inappropriate. If I would say something, he'd say, "Oh, you worked at Maplehurst?"
Mhm.
"Yes, I worked at Maplehurst Correctional Institute." I said, "Do you mind me asking why you're asking me that?" And he says, "You just don't seem like a Maplehurst gal." Well, that guy and that's kind of an insult because I don't even know what it meant. But I took it as you're not good enough to deal with the hardcore criminals. And I think I was. So, anyways, there was that kind of tension. But I asked him one day after several weeks of this kind of niggling a little bit, I said, Gord, would you mind staying after class so we could have a small chat? And he did. And that small chat turned into a large friendship. But here's the thing, because friendship just happens. It isn't something you have to work that hard at. It just happens when you're kind to them. And he was a diehard heroin addict. And he kept saying to me, listen, don't worry about me. I get out of here. I'm a revolving door. He didn't want a different life, or so he said. And he wanted to get out and do heroin again. And I kept trying to get through to him and tell him there's another way, Gord. And talk to him for weeks and weeks and weeks until he was finally leaving. And then I gave him a top up, what I call a top up, a final, the best of Phyllis, whatever I could give him to leave prison with some positivity
Mhm.
and something to think about. Well, I went in there every Monday and he was released on a Tuesday. By the following Monday, when I returned, The guards came up to me in the hallway and said, "We lost Gord." I mean, I collapsed against the wall, and it took
Mm.
prisoners to kind of bring me into the class and settle me down. Again, excuse me, again, it was all about them taking care of me. Some of the time,
What what happened afterwards after you found out that he died?
I grieved. You know what? I grieved.
Did
I
you
put it
actually grieve?
Well, not like I would grieve for my very closest best friend, but I did grieve, and I grieved in an unusual way. I felt like, again, I felt, what on earth did I miss? You know what? Honestly, Avram, I don't know whether it was an overdose, but unless someone leaves a note, you don't know whether it's intentional or accidental. And
Yes.
so I kept thinking to myself, it was intentional. I don't know. But I kept thinking to myself, what on earth more could I have said or done to have made a difference?
Yes.
Because in the end, we lost this beautiful human being.
Oh, Phyllis, you know what? They're so lucky to have you. They
I
are.
was lucky to have them.
I mean, yes, it's symbiotic,
Yep.
but the idea that you would grieve for this man whom he
Oh,
likely felt there was no one in the world to grieve for him, that's a really big deal. Like he left this world with someone crying tears for him.
I never stopped grieving for him. If this story comes up, I still feel sad and devastated that I lost him.
Yeah, no, it's devastating just to hear it. I actually had tears in my eyes. Let me ask you, is there a difference between the white collar prisoner, the dealer, and the rapist and the killers?
Absolutely. Oh yes. Oh yes. And you talk to them differently. They think differently. You deal with them differently, and they are different. I mean, we can't compare Paul Bernardo to, someone who's been dealing drugs or someone who's been actually. I had a prisoner who was sandwiched between Paul Bernardo and David Milgard. We'll continue with your question. And each one of them, like each one of us, is different, Avram. Each one of us is different. Each one of them is different. Each one of them has a different skill set, has a different intelligence, has a different level of understanding. I even had to go slower with some classes and more quickly with others, just to keep them interested.
No, Phyllis, what I'm asking though is because of the consequences to their actions, somebody murdered somebody, somebody raped somebody. Is there a difference in terms of how you approach them? Not because of their character exclusively. You're right. We all have talents, but because of the crime that they committed.
Are you asking me if I think differently about them or if I speak differently to them?
Well, let's deal with A and B. That's a good point.
Yes, and yes. Yes, I am human. I hate to admit it, but I am 100% human. And
Mhm.
so when I am dealing with a serial killer, I'm sorry, I meant to say a serial rapist. When I am dealing with a serial rapist or the granddad who raped his granddaughter, of course it has a different impact on me.
Yes.
When I am speaking with them, I am always searching to find out what A is their level of understanding, what their level of intelligence, what their background, what their experiences, because you can't help someone unless you know where they're coming from and where they want to go. There are some commonalities, of course, that you can deal with on a baseline, but unless you understand what someone's past has done to them and what they want to do and how hard they're willing to work at it and
Mhm.
how what remorse level they're at, how sincere they are and what they're doing there. If they're just putting in time or they want to make a difference in their
Would
lives.
Would you ever bring up their crime?
Not unless they did.
Uh-huh.
That's a good question. I've never been asked that of them.
Uh-huh.
I would never ever ask them a question. Now, we would have conversation and I would, to be honest with you, I would hope that they would share with me. This is one-on-one in life coaching. I'm not talking about in a bigger class.
Yes.
In a bigger class, they were usually much more private about their own um, wrongdoings. But when we were one-on-one in a life coach, then most often they would share with me, and especially when I share with them. And that's valuable, so valuable, because I learned that vulnerability, authenticity is the gift that we have, that we all have. And when we open ourselves up and we share our lives, particularly my difficult upbringing, being brought up, being abused, I mean, they figured, okay, this is not just, the lady who taught lawyers in the past, because I shared everything with them. But this is a lady who's really been through some difficulties in her own life and understands that life isn't perfect.
Yes.
It helped them to open up to me, and they did. But each one is different. There's no lumping it together and saying, well, this is what you say to them, or this is what you do with them. It's very instinctual. It's really very much that.
So, Phyllis, I have this image in my head of your individual work as a coach, sitting. Well, you have to tell me what the environment was, where you would sit. You had your own room, your own office, and you would be sitting with a prisoner. One prisoner whom you spoke about, whom you wrote about, you qualified as being a narcissist.
Yes.
And through your coaching, if I'm quoting you correctly, you somewhat brought him out of his narcissism.
So
So
proud of this.
tell me about coaching 101.
Well, first of all, I'll describe the room. And we're talking about this particular prison in Brampton. In Brampton, because I had such a large audience, I was given an auditorium. There's many meeting rooms in there. So you're not in their cell, you're not on their unit, you're in an auditorium. And it's a large auditorium, something that you might imagine in a
Like a
high school
school? In
school
a
gym, like
school.
a high
Yeah.
school, yeah, and very
Yeah.
primitive. It's not a fancy room. I went from really beautiful marble floors to very smelly cement floors. So, and I mean it literally, unfortunately. And not a lot of heat, and not a lot of cooling, and not comfortable. Nevertheless, I dress up and I go. So that's the atmosphere. Now, everybody files out after a 2-hour lecture because I did, forgiveness and gratitude and critical problem solving, intimate relationship building, and all of it. And after my 2-hour presentation, they would file out. But I had a sign up sheet. If anybody wanted to do life coaching, they would sit down with me and they would, according to their date, their appointment. And so we would sit down together and I would spend between an hour and 2 hours doing a private life coaching session with them. The man you're talking about, young man, another young boy, came up to me at the end of a class I was teaching. That's what friends are for, which is really just a lesson on friendship, developing friendship, maintaining friendship, selecting friends, influencing people, like all of that stuff is in that lesson. I should start delivering it again. And he came up to me at the end of that lesson and he said, I loved your lesson today, but I am a narcissist and I have no friends. And I said to him, well, what makes you a narcissist? Well, my Auntie M told me I'm a narcissist and she's a psychologist. I said, well, let's just sit down here and let's figure this out. First of all, I'm not even sure why you would walk up to me and want to have a talk about this if you didn't have some intention about making a difference or making a change at the very least. And he said, that's right, I'd like to talk about it. And we went through his life and his history. He was raised in a very strict religious home, religious Christian fundamentalist family, and he was homeschooled. And then he was thrown out in the backyard with the dogs. I can't remember, four dogs in the backyard. So this is how this boy was raised. So we talked, about my past and his past and the difficulties. And then I said, it occurs to me that your Auntie M may have called you a narcissist, but you didn't even have a chance to be selfish because you were just always alone. So why don't we try an experiment? How about you go out today, this afternoon, and you cozy up to one guy. And of course, I don't think I use that word cozy up. I don't use that word cozy up. I said, I would like you to befriend one man in your unit, on your unit, someone who you respect, someone who you think is going down the right path, someone who wants to make a difference in their own life. You know how to pick them. You pick one, and I want you to have a cup of tea with them, a conversation with them, a game of cards, or whatever it is that feels comfortable. And then we left, and I said goodbye, not knowing what would happen, but I couldn't wait to get back the following Monday to find out what he did. And he came up to me at the beginning of the session. And he said, Phyllis, I think I made a friend.
Really?
Week 2, Phyllis, I have another friend. By the end of his prison stay, he had become the most popular kid
No
in the
kidding.
prison. He was advocating for people. He was listening to people. He was giving people advice. He was one of the few men who was granted early parole because this prison is treatment centric. And most men have to give up any chance of early parole. This kid didn't. And you know what he did? He came up to me at the end of my critical problem solving lesson and he said, Phyllis, I was asked if I wanted to go on parole board and see if I could get early parole. And after taking your class on critical problem solving, I decided I'm better off here. I'm staying. Do you want to know the end of the story?
Yes.
2 years later, he's left. He's gone. 2 years later, 2.5 years later, I'm walking up to the control desk and entering the prison, and I hear footsteps running behind me. And I turn around, and the kid yells out, "Hi, Phyllis!" And I turn around, and it's him. I think I can't remember his name. And I turn around, it was him. He was dressed beautifully with a long gray trench coat and a briefcase. I said, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" He said, "I'm a social worker."
No kidding. That's
No
fantastic.
kidding. No kidding.
Phyllis, let me
I'm
ask you,
jumping up and down like with excitement.
take a drink of water there.
No, I'll be worse off.
When a investment person buys stock and in the next couple of weeks or months it goes up and they sell it, if you ask them, they'll tell you it's a real buzz, it's a real trip, it's something that they feel this real energy from. When you tell your story about telling this fellow, go out and here's how you can consider making friends, and he actually does it, is that a buzz for you? Is it an energy rush?
It's more than a buzz. It's like alarm bells are going off like, you did the right thing.
Yeah,
Because
change
I have
someone's
no
life.
idea what I'm doing. It's all instinct.
Yes.
It's more than a buzz. Everything's a buzz. Everything gives me a buzz. Speaking to you right now, everything in my life is a buzz.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that's a big buzz.
So that's an interesting point that you're bringing out. It's all by instinct. Is it all by instinct? Like here, you're teaching a class on forgiveness. You're teaching a class on problem solving, on friendship. Where did you come up with your stuff? How did you develop these classes?
Another excellent question.
Thank you.
My education and my discipline is in journalism. I studied and graduated from Ryerson in journalism. So I know how to speak, I know how to write, I know how to research, and I can tell a story. So I put all that together and I thought, what do prisoners need to learn? Now, everything I write is vetted by the educational director of the prison. At least it's supposed to be. So I think she came to the point where she was trusting me and stopped looking over my materials. But I came up with, they need anger management and they need forgiveness, and I came up with all this stuff. And then I just simply went home and I researched it. I spent an hour, a year and a half writing, because I would produce for every lesson I taught, and I still have them. I produce a booklet of about 25 pages for every single lesson. So I went home and my then husband just had to give me up for a year and a half because I was writing and writing and writing. Then my materials had to be vetted and then they were delivered.
Pardon me?
I think I answered your question.
You did. No, very well, actually. What was a milestone for you? How did you know when you were doing well?
I think I knew I was doing well when so many markers, my audience kept growing. I started out with about 6 men, and they told 6 men, and they told 6 men. I don't know if you remember the Breck commercial, but it was growing exponentially. So that was a marker. I had another marker with the stories that I wrote in my book. Every time I got through to somebody, like the young boy I spoke about, I knew that was a marker. When the men protected me.
Yes.
And one of the biggest markers, since you're asking, was I was trying to make a point one day. And I have no idea what I was talking about at this point, but back then I hope I did. I was trying to make a point, and one man from the very back of the room, and I will never forget this, I'm quite sure I included it in my book, he said, "Phyllis, there isn't a man in this room who doesn't know that if you thought you could make a point or make a difference, you would crawl across the auditorium to get through to us."
Oh, it's lovely.
That was a marker.
That's
that
lovely.
I have never forgotten that. It's one of my most proudest moments ever in my life.
That's lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
I know those moments. I've gotten them from time to time myself. running a
Sure.
nonprofit, a humanitarian organization. And
I'm
it's interesting what you're saying because, you have all these things being hurled at you throughout your career, but there's one or two lines, one or two narratives that stick with you and they compel you, they push you forward, right?
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
for you. Good for you. Um, Phyllis, I don't know if this is the proper language, but you chose men over women. Most of your work is with men. There are more male prison prisons, so that might be one reason. But why men over women? How are they different? What was your choice predicated on?
Well, we won't talk about the anatomy when you
Right, the
ask
anatomy.
but here's the thing. Number one, there are 25 Ontario prisons, and only a couple of them are women. Most of them are men. But it is true. I did prefer men over women. When dealing with women, I found they were competitive with me. They were somewhat competitive with one another as well. At one point, I saw two women groping one another in front of me in the front row of my audience, which is, I handled it poorly at the time. But they
How did you
challenged.
handle it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember. I said nothing and did nothing. And then I went and I reported it to my director of education. And I said, I did, this happened and I didn't know what to do. So I just kept going, kept talking. And she said, really? And she wouldn't be afraid to call me out, this particular, none of them are afraid to call me out. And she said, well, would you have done that?
Mhm,
And I said, no. And she said, well, then why would you allow that?
mhm,
And I
mhm,
felt like an idiot. In
mhm.
fact, I was an idiot. And so she says, next week you're going to go back, you're going to talk about it, and you're going to lay down the rules. I did.
And that helped.
Yeah, it was very awkward. I mean, I don't want to say, ladies, I don't want you groping one another in front of me. But yeah, it never happened again.
Was it okay to cry with prisoners?
Oh, yeah, I cry all the time. I love to cry. That shows that I'm really feeling what they're feeling. I cry with prisoners. I laugh with prisoners. I talk with prisoners. It's all good. Emotion is
Would
good.
you sob?
No, no, no. Tears run down my cheeks. Motion, not sobbing. No, no. I'm not much of a sobber,
But you would cry.
but I would visibly cry and not try to stop myself or hold back or anything.
Yes.
When my friend's telling me the other day about the passing of her husband, I cried. I don't try to hold that back. Well, I wouldn't do that with them either if they're telling me about being raped or they're telling me about being beaten or they're telling me, and of course, some of it resonates with me anyway.
Did you take stuff home with you?
Do you know, that's another good question. If you ask John, my partner, he will tell you that I would call him every time I was on my way home, and I would sound as if I was high. I was so overwhelmed and thrilled and just I, full of emotion and passion for what I had just done and what I had just felt I had accomplished there, that I would just be so happy and so high. The odd time there would be a dilemma and I would take it home. Mostly I was just coming home feeling happy and high and passionate and couldn't wait to go back again. But the odd time, like with Cowboy Gord, I gave it a lot of thought. With the chair boy, as I call him, Hudson, who attacked me, I gave that a lot of thought because I want to always debrief with myself and think, what could I have done better? What could I do differently? Well, what will I do next time? I still think about that stuff.
Yeah, I would suggest that I would be driving home and I would be heartbroken about the fact that this woman was raped or that this fellow had a family member who was killed or he killed somebody. I mean, the idea that humankind, I guess what I'm saying is prison must be a sad place in of itself.
Prison is a very sad place, but my classroom is not a sad place.
It's full of light, is it?
It's full of love, support, compassion, learning, kindness, every good quality that I could possibly think of to bring there and to bring out of them and to bring my best, to be my best.
Yeah.
They taught
Yeah.
me this stuff. Honestly, Avram, remember, I used to teach lawyers. I was 15 years ago a little more arrogant, a little less patient, a little less tolerant, a little less everything.
Yes.
But when I walked into prison and I felt I had to be the very best I could be, and I'm teaching them this stuff, so of course I'm learning at the same time. It works. It made me a better person. And I love that person that it made me. And people noticed it.
How so?
I had a few friends that said, whoa, there's a change in you. It
Yes.
didn't happen overnight and it didn't happen quickly, but it did happen. And I still feel, every once in a while, the other Phyllis is going to come out to play, but hopefully not very often. But
I like the way you say
hopefully,
that.
but yeah, I'm still a real person. But for the most part, I try to think before I speak. I try to act with kindness. I try to care. I try to help. I have the benefit of all those years.
Phyllis, again, I have this image. I'm an artist, so I think in terms of images of this room with smelly floors, and
Yeah,
there's 100 guys in there, right?
you got it.
And the image that I have in my head is because you talked about, how illuminating this is that to use a complete cliche, that there were no bars in that room.
That's
That,
right.
the old thing is, well, you can incarcerate a man, but you can't incarcerate his mind. Would that be accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Those guys would tell me stories. There was one, such a touching story, and such fun we would have too, because they would tell me stories. Like they would wait all week for me to come. I was their Oprah. And when I arrived, they were bursting to tell me a story. Well, there's a very cute story. I'll try to keep it short, of a man who walked in one day, and I cannot remember what lesson I was delivering, but he actually wanted to share. He said, "Do you mind if I share a story today?" They are allowed to make a phone call every Saturday morning. And the way that I think it has changed in the last 2 years, but the way that they were making phone calls at that time, at the time of the story, they had to make a collect call. They could not just dial somebody up. They had to make a collect call. And I'm not sure why that was. But this man made a collect call to a wrong number.
Mm.
And a woman answered the phone and they spoke for 30 minutes, the allotted time. And at the end of the call, the woman asked if he would call back.
Mm.
And the next week, he called back. And the next week, and the next week, and the next week, until finally they arranged to meet. So she came to prison to meet him. And she was far, far out of town, as I recall, like a 2-hour travel. She came to meet him on Visitor's Day. And by the time he was leaving prison, they were getting married. That's
Wow.
why that's such a sweet story.
Yes, it is.
Just sharing, that's what I mean. They're sharing beautiful stories with me. So we have fun. It isn't all about hell and high water. It's much about good things that happen to good people, because just being in prison doesn't make them bad people.
Your coaching and your classes, would they be construed as rehabilitation for the
100
prisoners?
100%. I believe that with all my heart. Yes. And that's part of the problem. There's not enough
There's not enough of it.
rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
That's exactly right. Okay. So in our Canadian prisons, and a recent Maclean article pointed this out, we are doing a terrible job of rehabilitation. And it's hurting everybody. It's hurting everybody because when you bring people into prison, you put them in a cell, you throw away the key and you forget about them. Nothing happens if nothing happens, and nothing's going to change. And so they do their sentence, they get out, they harm again, people get hurt, we are not safe. We are paying money to house them. So they come back into prison and they spend another 2 years or another 10 years or another 20 years. And we are feeding them and we are housing them and we are guarding them. And that all costs taxpayers' money. If we would spend that money that we're paying to keep them there on rehabilitation, we would be putting a better product out and we would have a safer environment. That's my feeling, and that's what I've witnessed.
What is your involvement nowadays?
But so what happened was when COVID hit, they threw all of the volunteers out. There were a few at the treatment centric prison because they come in to do AA. They come in to do CA, which is Cocaine Anonymous, and they have a sexual, it's called SORP, Sex Offenders Program, and various other things that they come. They actually have Toastmasters there too, by the way, which is such fun.
For
But
speakers, for public speaking.
for public speaking, yes, and I did a lot of Toastmasters back in the day and competitive speaking. So they had all of that, but they threw us all out when COVID hit, and I began writing. And once I began writing, and that was after having done my 10 years of volunteerism, I began writing, and then I began writing, and then that took a year and a half, and then I was busy promoting my book, and now I'm working with a movie producer. So life has gotten very busy, and I never give up my friends and my family, and so I'm a pretty busy gal. And would I return to prison? There's a real large part of me that wants to. I'm just not sure how realistic it is in my life right now
Why is that?
because of my other obligations.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if a prison was close enough, um, I'd probably go back tomorrow, but they're all pretty distant. I mean, it takes about an hour and a half to get out there and an hour and a half to get back in rush hour. It could be even more. I was
Brampton, yes.
doing it in snowstorms, and it didn't matter what. I remember once there was an accident on the 401 and I couldn't get past, I don't know, I'm going to say Western Road. So I called my director from the car to say I couldn't make it. No problem, we'll cancel your class, she said. And I just sat in the car and cried. She didn't care. I cared. I felt so badly that I was letting the men down. I missed a week.
You qualified yourself as a good girl who's a bad girl. And you said that because you stay in touch with some of the prisoners or ex-prisoners who are
Yes.
out on the street now. How is that going?
Well, you know what? It's not like we're best buddies and I'm doing lunch with them all the time. There's
Yeah.
about, I'm going to say three that I've stayed in touch with. One was chapter one in my book. I talk about Jason, who was a very serious alcoholic. And I've stayed in touch with his dad. I'm not as in touch with Jason, if you will, but I have stayed in touch with his dad. In fact, he contacted me as I began writing my book, and it's a very long story. But I talked this young boy into going into Homewood, which is a rehab center
Mhm.
for alcoholism and other
Mhm.
abuse. And through the story, I was speaking with him into the night because he called me suicidal. And I said to him, I need to go to sleep and I need you to go to sleep and we will pick this conversation up again in the morning. But of course, I was concerned because he was suicidal. So I left him in what I felt was a good place, but although I wasn't certain, I asked to speak to his dad. Turns out his dad is a philanthropist. He builds hospital wings and a university professor in English. And I told him that I had begun writing a book, and he said, Send me something. And I thought, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But notwithstanding, I sent him 5 chapters of my book, and the man has stayed in touch with me ever since because he loved what I had written.
Mhm. Mhm. You know,
Um,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's one that I've stayed in touch with the dad. The other one is Destiny. I believe I called her Destiny in the book. She was a poet, a prostitute, and became my friend. I'm not going to give away the farm. I'm not going to tell you what ended up
No,
happening
don't.
to her, but she is someone else who makes me very proud. And I only communicate with her by text, only by text. Jason, I was speaking to on the phone. And the third one is Citizen Manny, who became my friend and is still my friend. Most recently, Manny and I and Judge Harvey Brownstone, former Judge Harvey Brownstone, and James O'Leary were on a panel together at the University of Toronto doing a fundraiser. So that's how
Nice.
close I am with Manny. I am so proud of him. That's another incredible, incredible story of what he's become.
When I write, I find it to be very cleansing. I've been writing for many years. As you're writing your book, or as you wrote your book, actually, um, how did you see yourself having gone through such an intense, rich experience? I'm assuming that you pulled yourself out of that room where you were incarcerated and when you were a little kid. Was it a cleansing process for you writing that book?
I never really thought of it like that, to be honest with you. All I did was decide that I had nothing to do
Hmm.
because I need something to do.
Hmm.
And because I have written so much all my life, I've never written a book, but I was writing technical user guides at the law firm and teaching them. So that was writing. And then I was writing the lessons at the prison. So that, of course, is writing. And I decided I need something to do. And it was on the prompt of a friend who said to me, I was telling her a prison story, and she said, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I said, oh, God, I have no time for that. And that night I went home and began writing. Well, I just thought I'm going to start at point A. It's a memoir. I can shape it up any way I want later on. I'm going to start
Yes.
at the beginning and end at the end. And it was an enlightenment of sorts, but it was not a cleansing at all, really, because
Hmm.
I just felt a lot of pride. I just felt a lot of pride in some of the things I had done, and it was sharing it with people. And no, it was just a beautiful experience. And you know what? I sat down and wrote for a year and a half from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. with nary a break, and finished the book.
You,
Never did anything else.
you must feel really good about yourself.
I'm proud of having written a book.
Yeah.
I'm proud of being asked onto your show and others. I'm proud of the fact that somebody wants to make my movie and that I have something to give him on an advisory level, something to share with the world that I hope and I pray can inspire others to find their passion, to find their calling, to use all of the adversity in their life to rise above it all and to use it and do something with it that not only helps others but helps themselves.
Good. Nicely said. What should people do if they would like to volunteer in the prison system?
Well, that's another great question. I'm currently mentoring. They should get in touch with me. That's what
Okay.
they should do because I am currently mentoring two people, a man and a woman, both of whom had read my book and my emails in my book at the end of the book, contacted me, wrote me a note. We subsequently met. I don't do that without caution, but they're vetted, and we met, and they want to volunteer in the prison system. The man, who's a lovely elder gentleman, is in the prison system teaching art, and the woman is going in, and we've become and stayed friends. I know you're not shocked, and she is going in and doing Toastmasters, conducting Toastmasters in the prison that I worked in.
Hmm. Where
So
can
that's
people where can people be in touch?
Well, my email is imagine.this@rogers.com. Imagine, just like it's spelled, imagine.this@rogers.com.
Okay. And if you have any problems, you can get in touch with Phyllis through me. Phyllis, I want to thank you so much for this. It was very deeply inspiring. I so enjoyed talking with you and hearing your story and all of the things that you did over a 10-year period and are doing now. There's a phrase in Hebrew, kol hakavod, which means all the power to you.
Oh,
And I'm happy you're proud of yourself. And we, humankind, on this end, are very proud of you as well. So nicely done.
thank you. It's all Bashir. And I so appreciate this interview. And you're a skilled interviewer,
Thank
Avrum.
you.
And it's obvious that you've done your homework. And I love some of the questions you've asked because they're very unique.
Thank you, Phyllis. I appreciate that a lot. It stays with me. So even if I'm kind of cavalier and acting kind of cool about it, it's. Tell me something. What does Beshert mean?
Bashir in my world means divine intervention. To me, everything that happened in my life, I mean, for me to get fired from a job that I loved, I
Yes.
absolutely loved my job. To this day, I would love teaching lawyers. Not that I'm prepared to do it at this point in my life, but I love technology. I love teaching lawyers. I love the respect. I'm going to tell you, I love the reputation I had in the industry. But for me to get fired
Yeah.
after 30 years and then land up at Oprah and then land up in prison
Hmm.
and just find myself and find my life and build my kindness profile,
Hmm.
that is beshert.
Yeah.
That is divine intervention. That stuff, but you have to be open to it. You have to be looking for things that are possibilities. As you close your mind to everything, nothing happens. But once you open up your mind and you're open to things that could be possible and you go after it relentlessly if necessary, magic happens.
I'm desperately trying to bring this interview to a close. Not desperately, I'm kidding. But you bring up another great point, and I have to ask you about it because in my closing of the interview, I always talk about finding your own personal gift. One of the ways of doing that, according to you, is opening up your mind. You did go to the Oprah show. How do you open up your mind?
Awareness, just awareness. If something is happening and you're an observer, think, what could I be doing to make this better for those people? What could I be doing to make this experience better for me? Do I have something to give? I had no idea what I had to give. I know I can talk. That was it. I know I can write. So I kind of cobbled that together and made it work. But being aware of every situation, living in the moment, practicing mindfulness is where it begins.
Okay,
Stretch yourself a little bit and don't accept no for an answer when it is a smart goal, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time framed.
excellent.
That's your goal. I know I
Ladies and
went through
gentlemen, my guest today has been Phyllis Taylor. The name of her book is The Prison Lady. You can see it in the picture up there. It's available everywhere, including Indigo, Amazon, right?
that. Yes. Yes.
Buy it. I think you'll glean from this interview that Phyllis is highly inspiring and her book is equally as inspiring. So pick it up, especially if you're trying to find your way in life, trying to open your mind, to see new vistas, to walk through that door. It's not easy. It's not easy. I was the CEO, founding CEO at a humanitarian organization for 20 years. I left there. I had enough. Yeah, it was very, very stressful. And for about 5 or 6 years afterwards, I really, really struggled to find myself again. It's a hard task, right, Phyllis?
Absolutely. I'll help you, Avrum.
No, I'm better now. I've kind of found myself, but thank you so much. I may come to you for advice. You're the Eitzigegeber, the Eitzigegeber.
I hope
Lady,
so.
no, you are. Ladies and gentlemen, remember in celebrating our shared humanity, may kindness, understanding, and the development of our character guide our paths forward. Until next time, embrace the beauty of our collective journey with eyes wide open to the magnificent that we've created and the knowledge that there is so much more to come. Thank you for joining me. The show is called The Avrum Rosensweig Show. We will be back tomorrow with Neshama Karlbach, an icon in the Jewish music industry. It's been great. Phyllis, once again, thank you so much. And I'm
Thank
sure
you.
we'll talk again.
Thank you, Avrum.